What's up guys, it's Trey from TCS Gaming here, and welcome to a brand new TCS Top 7. Top 7. Sorry, it's been a while since I made one of these. Pokemon Sword and Shield were announced earlier this year, and with all the new information coming out to, rave reviews, I thought it would be a good time to remake an old countdown of mine. This time around I want to put more focus into the Pokemon and trainer battles, meaning rivals, gym leaders, and Elite Four members. I'll still take things like story and regional landmarks into account, but they won't affect my rankings as much. And I won't be taking technical issues into consideration this time around, like Gen 1's mini glitches that cause certain functions of the game to not work as intended. That kind of stuff was more of an issue with the technology at the time, not the actual games. Also, I like all these games a ton, so please don't get too mad at me. Okay, bye. Gen 6 is my least favorite generation. I put a copious amount of hours into X and Y, and despite that, I still think they are the quote-unquote worst Pokemon games. Now, I certainly don't dislike these games. In fact, there are a lot of things I like about X and Y. The Pokemon roster is the smallest of any generation, but in this case, it's quality over quantity. Gen 6 has some really great Pokemon. There's a solid starting trio, interesting legendaries, and some unique and memorable designs. That doesn't mean they are all amazing. I'm not really a fan of the Cupcake, or the Rock, or my car keys. I actually like Klefki, I just find the concept hilarious. I also love the addition of the Fairy type, as well as adding the Fairy type to existing Pokemon. It certainly helped balance out the Dragon type's advantages and buff some Pokemon who needed it. But on the other hand, there are also a number of things I don't like about Gen 6. The most important flaw is in the trainer battles. First off, you have 4 rival characters, but none of them are particularly interesting. In fact, the only one who I even somewhat like is Serena, and even then, having a conversation with her is the equivalent of speaking directly to a brick wall. Besides their characters being weak, their battles are just as lacking. I can't even remember a single battle. And that remains true with the gym leaders and Elite Four members. I could barely tell you any of their names, and I certainly don't remember any of their teams. Who is this? Who are you? What is that? I don't know who any of these people are! The only battle I really remember was the Grass Gym Leader, and the only reason I remember it is because it was such a joke. Most encounters with the villainous Team Flare end up feeling completely pointless, and none of the boss characters are particularly interesting or tough to beat, so it comes off as very unnecessary. And then there's Lumiose City, the crown jewel of Kalos, this fucking massive waste of space. I hate this area. It's without a doubt my least favorite city in any Pokemon game. It is huge, but there is almost nothing in it. That's my main complaint with X and Y. Everything that isn't battling and catching Pokemon feels like it was just here to pad out game time. But despite that, I still enjoy these games. Just not as much as the others. Gen 7 had a lot of similar issues to Gen 6, but at the same time it also does a lot of things better. While the pacing is horrendous at times, the story is much more engaging than X and Y's. I really like how they integrated the legendary Pokemon into the story by having them be present throughout the game, and some of the characters were actually engaging and grew along the way. Lily, for example, starts the game out completely closed off from everyone except for Professor Kukui, but over time she changes from her encounters with the player. She grows more confident in herself as the game progresses, even entering the Ultra Wormhole with her character to save her mother. The evil teams in Sun and Moon are also a highlight. Team Skull is solid in itself with some tough boss battles and interesting dialogue. Plus, they look super hip, yo. But the Aether Foundation takes it to another level. If there were ever a Pokemon game that might make me question if people in Pokemon can actually coexist, it was Sun and Moon. Let me just say this. Lusamine is f***ed up. Sun and Moon's story is one of the better ones in the main Pokemon games, but like I said earlier, the pacing is really terrible. It's one thing to have a game with a lot of dialogue, but you have to figure out where the best places are to put it. Sun and Moon has a huge problem with placing long cutscenes back to back, and yeah, I like the story, but at some point, I want to play the damn game. It's a real shame because Alola itself is actually an amazing region with some amazing Pokemon. A quick glance at the Pokedex reminded me just how solid this roster was. The starting trio is one of the best in Pokemon. Honestly, if you put it against any other starting trio, it would be hard to find better. Alola has a number of Pokemon with unique abilities as well. Wishiwashi comes to mind as a Pokemon who relies on its ability to have success in battle. Let me put it to you this way. Wishiwashi sucks, but if you activate its schooling form, then holy sh**! It has stats on par with legendaries. Bewear has an ability, Fluffy, that gives it an extra weakness, but it cuts physical attack damage in half, and if you've used Bewear, then you know that it's already pretty bulky, so this ability is kick-ass. Bewear is easily one of my favorite Pokemon from this gen. It's an absolute beast. And it's so adorable. Just look at that face. Oh, and it loves giving hugs. Oh my, oh god, oh god, oh god. Now for something not everyone likes, the trials. I actually don't dislike the trials themselves, but they did deprive us of a chance to see some truly awesome gym battles. The Kahunas just didn't do a good job as replacement gym leaders. And I am all for change in my favorite franchises, especially one that's been around as long as Pokemon. But I'm certainly glad they are bringing back gyms in Gen 8. As a whole, the trainer battles were better than Gen 6, but still weaker than most games, which is why I couldn't put Gen 7 any higher. Ranking the top 5 was really hard, so Gen 3 had to go somewhere. For me, Gen 3 is my least played generation, and for a while I didn't know why, but when I thought back, there really wasn't anything about these games that blew me away. The region itself is pretty cool, despite what IGN says about it. Hoenn has a lot of diversity in its geography, especially when compared to Kanto and Johto. You go from a forest, to a beach, to a volcano, and even a desert all on one island. The story is pretty weak, even by Pokemon standards. Both Team Magma and Aqua want to change the landscape of the world to their liking, but neither have a valid motivation for doing it. Their reasoning is just because it would be better, fam. Pokemon-wise, Gen 3 probably has the most inconsistent Pokédex in the entire series. There are a ton of great Pokemon that come from Hoenn, but there's an equal amount of Pokemon that are complete garbage. Here, let me just show you what I mean. For every good Pokemon I name, I'll also name one that sucks. Blaziken. Wingull. Gardevoir. Azurill. Altaria. A drunk teddy bear. Milotic. Muck but worse. Metagross. Knockoff Pichu. ×2. Shiftry. Balls. Salamence. Love Disc. I could go on, but I think this is starting to get repetitive at this point. The best part of Gen 3 for me were the trainer battles. The gym leaders are especially awesome. The first couple are eh. But then it's Flannery, Norman, Winona, Tate and Liza, and Wallace. They all have some pretty good battles, especially Wallace, because 1, his team is really tough, and 2, he gives me the chance to kill a Love Disc. Norman is my favorite though. Not only is his battle tough, but he's also your freaking dad! This is the only gen in the series where the main character knows their father. And that just begs the question, why is Norman the only dad we ever see? Well, I have a game theory that's gonna blow your mind. Norman is actually the father of every main character in Pokemon. Think about it. The main character's dad is never around, except in Gen 3. Why? Because he's the gym leader of Petalburg City. But also, Black and White 2's Battle Frontier has him show up to battle, so you know he gets around. So, who's your daddy? Norman's your daddy. Eat your heart out, MatPat. Overall, the trainer battles are what moved Gen 3 past 6 and 7 for me, but that's about it. I just couldn't justify putting it any higher. So I realized by putting Gen 1 in the very middle of my list, I have basically dug my own grave. On one side, I'll have those of you who think I'm rating Gen 1 too high, but I need you all to remember what I said at the beginning of the video. Flashback. And I won't be taking technical issues into consideration this time around. And I'm not gay. So if the reason you hate me is based on Gen 1's technical issues, then that hate is completely unjustified. The other side are the Gen 1ers. I'll just ignore them. Generation 1 is definitely the simplest generation. I would say that Kanto is probably the least visually appealing of the Pokemon series, but its progression is fairly straightforward, which keeps the game moving at a good pace, at the very least. The Pokemon feature designs that are some of the least visually intense out of any generation, but the designs themselves work for this region. These Pokemon are based on real-life animals, plants, and pollution, oddly enough. Okay, yeah, so maybe giant rock monsters and floating magnets aren't quite realistic, but a lot of these Pokemon are based on real animals like fish and birds. And while these designs may not seem to be the most inspired, Gen 1 also doesn't run the risk of over-design like we've seen more recently. I mean, seriously, how do we go from rats and turtles to f***ing Transformers? Besides the way they look, some of these Pokemon are still all-time favorites of mine. I love the starting trio of Squirtle, Charmander, and Bulbasaur, as well as hard hitters like Nidoking and Alakazam, special defense walls like Vileplume and Tentacruel, and of course, my one true love, Butterfree. And realistically, I can't think of too many weak Pokemon here in terms of battle properties. Most of them have a use, even if they aren't all around amazing. Except for Farfetch'd. That thing sucks. Generation 1 also has some awesome trainer battles. Obviously, your rival, Blue, stands out as a great trainer who tests you pretty well each time you face him. The Elite Four is a huge highlight with some epic battles. From Lorelei's Killer Chillers to Lance's Raging Dragon Brethren, you have some great matchups here. And of course, there's Blue, ripping your title of champion out from under you with a team that's just as good as any. And it's certainly more believable than in the remakes, where Trace becomes champion. Yeah, this dude. I'm still not over that, by the way. There's no way this guy could become champion. I mean, how could he, when all of his Pokemon only know 3 moves? But yeah, Gen 1 is pretty good. It's not the end-all be-all Pokemon, nor is it an absolute dumpster fire. So please don't hate me too much. But if you do, at least make your angry comment funny for me to read, thanks. The top 3 of this list was so hard to order because I absolutely love Gens 2, 4, and 5, but I had to put Gen 5 at number 3. Gen 5 is filled with great Pokemon, characters, and Unova's amazing landmarks and cities. Unova has got to be my favorite region from a structural standpoint. It is huge, and yet they were able to cram so many unique environments and interesting locations that keep the game fresh the whole way through. The cities themselves are a high point. Most of them have some sort of exclusive point of interest or set piece. Nimbasa City has an amusement park, Driftveil has cold storage, Mistralton City has a full airport, and Castelia City is how you make a big city in a Pokemon game correctly, Lumiose, you confusing piece of shit. Besides the region, Gen 5 sports an incredible story with fantastic characters. Your rivals, Cheren and Bianca, are your childhood friends who support you along your journey. I'm partial to Bianca because of her character arc in Black and White, and her inclusion in Black and White too. There's also N, a man fighting for the ethical treatment of Pokemon with the villainous Team Plasma, who betrays him at the end of the game. He's like PETA, minus all the terribleness of PETA. So he's not like PETA at all, actually. The gym leaders in Gen 5 are amazing in both design and in battle. The Butler Trio of the first gym gives a battle based on which starter Pokemon you chose. Berg's artistic gym is matched with a great fight against his Leavanny. And of course there's Elisa and her Zebstrika. Her battle isn't all that, but the spectacle of it certainly is. The Elite Four is pretty average, but Caitlyn has the best battle of all of them with a powerhouse psychic team. But where would all these battles be without some amazing Pokemon? Now I'll admit that Gen 5's Pokedex is probably the weakest aspect. There are a lot of Pokemon in the Unova region, 156 of them, which is the most ever introduced. So you're bound to have some quote-unquote filler Pokemon. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of incredible choices, but some of them are garbage in one way or another. Some are just forgettable, some have questionable designs, and some just plain suck, even among the legendaries, where maybe a third of those introduced are actually interesting. But on the other side, some of these Pokemon are all-time favorites of mine, like Scolipede, Samurott, Hydreigon, Hydreigon, I don't know how to say that, and Ferrothorn. My favorite is probably Galvantula, which makes zero sense considering that I hate spiders. Then again, it's called Arachnophobia, and Galvantula only has 6 legs. Loopholes. This thing has a really unique typing, and one of the best movesets I've ever seen. Like, seriously. It's really good. Just like these games. Abrupt endings are abrupt. At number 2, I have Generation 2. Generation 2 got real experimental with the Pokedex, for better or for worse. I really liked some of the additions. They gave old Pokemon new evolutions, introduced baby Pokemon, and added in a lot of single evolution Pokemon. Now, some of this may seem kind of pointless. Like, baby Pokemon? Really? But hear me out before you criticize. The best thing they did with Gen 2's Pokedex was the new evolutions. Johto added evolutions to Pokemon who sorely needed them, and gave evolutions to decent Pokemon to make them much more viable. Some of my favorite Pokemon come from this method, like Scizor and Crobat, and Pokemon like Seadra became much more useful after it got a new evolution. Then there's the more experimental part of the Pokedex, the single evolution Pokemon. There's always been single evolution Pokemon, but Gen 2 added a ton of them, and some of them work, and some don't. On one side, you'll get Pokemon like Skarmory or Heracross, who are both absolute beasts, but I would say that there are more that are pretty dumb, like Corsola, and Wobbuffet, and Stantler, and Girafarig, and Unknown, and Delibird, and Dunsparce. Wow. That's a lot. You also get Pokemon like Shuckle and Quillfish, which are only useful in certain situations. Now for the third part of the Pokedex, baby Pokemon, I don't have an explanation for this other than breeding. They suck, and most all of them have a dumb evolution method. They add nothing and I hate them. F you, Cleffa. Moving on, we have the Johto League, which might be my favorite league in the whole series. Every battle is a highlight, and they are challenging as all hell. Each and every gym leader and Elite Four member have that one Pokemon. That one Pokemon who is just an absolute beast. Bugsy's Scyther, Whitney's Demon Cow, Chuck's Poliwrath, Jasmine's Steelix, Koga's Crobat, and Lance's f***ing Dragonite trio. God damn, this is a difficult battle. This league is the reason why Gen 2 is so high on my list. It's such a memorable collection of characters, gyms, and battles, and if that weren't enough for you, then you can go back to Kanto and challenge the original league too. That is a lot of content on this one little cartridge. If you've been around for a while, then you knew this was going to be number one. Generation 4 has been my favorite generation of Pokemon ever since I played Platinum for the first time. And it's not hard to see why, because Gen 4 does a lot of things right. Starting with the Pokedex, we can see similarities to Generation 2. You've got a lot of experimentation, baby Pokemon, and most importantly, new evolutions. The new evolutions are the main reason this Pokedex is so amazing to me. I like to think that Gen 4 and Gen 2 are connected through these new evolutions because of Pokemon like Murkrow and Misdreavus. In my opinion, it always seemed like some of these evolution lines were unfinished in Gen 2. Gen 4 basically confirms this by giving these Pokemon new evolutions similar to the way Gen 2 did with some of Gen 1's Pokemon. And Gen 4 even gives some Gen 1 Pokemon new evolutions too, like Magmortar and Electivire. Now, you could criticize this Pokedex and say it's just a bunch of evolutions if you're annoying, but there are plenty of fresh faces as well. In fact, almost all of the new Pokemon are either amazing in their design or usefulness in battle. There are too many that I like, so here's a list of all of my favorites to save time. As for the new baby Pokemon, nobody cares. Okay, so the Sinnoh League is up there for me as one of the best leagues in Pokemon history. I think Gen 2 has it beat, but these guys still kick ass. I mean, all in one game, you have an archaeologist, a vegan, a girl whose feet would probably be looted if these games released today, a WWE wrestler, a bitch. Seriously, f*** you, Fantina. Your gym is the reason why my Staravia died. Brock's dad, a schoolgirl who is definitely a yandere, and the 4th Hokage. I mean, what a cast of characters, am I right? And they have some epic battles too, but none compared to the goddess of Pokemon herself, Cynthia. Cynthia has, without a doubt, the best champion battle in any Pokemon game. She might even have the best NPC battle, period, with Red from Gen 2 realistically being the only trainer battle that comes close. Her team is insane. Some champions like to focus on a specific type, but Cynthia was a previous Pokedex holder. She's caught them all, and has handpicked her favorites to create her powerhouse lineup. Just look at this squad. It's so balanced that she has a move from every type in the game. Another thing I love about Gen 4 is the game's atmosphere. These games go into some pretty dark territories thanks to Team Galactic, a team that doesn't seem like too much of a threat at first. That is, until they start bombing cities and towns. Just let that sink in for a sec. They use explosives that put the lives of people and Pokemon in danger. Wild. Cyrus even opens up a new dimension in which he tries to release the shadow Pokemon Giratina to wreak havoc on the entire world. I'm not going to sit here and say Gen 4 has the best story in Pokemon, but it is heavily underrated in my opinion. If there's one negative to discuss in Generation 4, it's probably how slow the battling is. It definitely hurts the early game a lot, considering that the beginning of Pokemon games are already pretty slow, but I've never had too much of a problem with the game speed. Trust me though, I get why it's complained about. And there you have it, the top 7 Pokemon generations. I implore you all to leave a comment on this video with your list for these generations of Pokemon. Trust me, I will be reading your comments. But for now, let's just hope that Generation 8 can live up to the expectations of us Pokemon fans. Wait, that's impossible.